We as Americans have held a certain view of Native Americans for a long time.
A view that has been manipulated and distorted to our liking.
But now, it's time to take a step away from that view and look a little deeper. The Mojave Indians, a tribe founded on religion, farming, and old customs, came about in the early 17th century. The Mojave creator Montevideo created his people alongside the Colorado River and taught them how to plant. Their name, meaning by water, comes from the surrounding river. For this reason, farming was everything to the Mojave Indians. Feller states, quote, "The Indians believed that because their God taught them how to farm and use nature, that should be their way of life." The Indians grew huge amounts of corn, primarily because the Colorado River provided an abundant resource of water, allowing for a surplus of corn to be grown. The Colorado River was a huge part of their lives. Along with farming, they also believed heavily in religion. Having a religious background was everything to the Mojave tribe. Their faith was everything and defined who they were. One special ceremony that was imperative to the tribe was that of the rite of passage into a religious state. Carol Farley states, quote, "In order to reach this state, they had to ingest the datra plant," end quote. This ceremony was so important to the Mojave identity that if one did not ingest this sacred plant by the time of their death, they would no longer be seen as a member of the tribe. For almost 250 years of existence since the tribe was formed, the Mojave Indians lived in complete peace and harmony, but in 1859 American settlers decided to ruin it all. They tried to force the Indians off the land, but they refused. The Americans gave up for 21 years, but in 1891 they began to force Mojave children into schools, forcing them to learn, write, and speak English. This hurt the Mojave tribe because the future generation would have no idea of who they were. Finally, in 1961, the Americans relinquished the reins and let the Mojave Indians be. Gerald Reed states, quote, "Although by this time 80% of the newer generation had grew up with English morals and values, this freedom would allow for the revitalization of the Mojave tribe," end quote. A revitalization that would bring back old Mojaves and customs and lifestyles that had once been lost.
Currently, the Mojave Indians have a reservation that is 42,000 acres that stretches from Arizona, California, and Nevada. On the reservation, Native Americans normally live in RVs. The Mojave Indians also own very successful casinos and resorts. One of the most successful casino is the AVI Hotel and Casino, as well as the Powwow. Annually, the tribe hosts an 18-hole championship golf tournament. In October, everyone gets together from the tribe to celebrate the annual Port Mojave Indian Days. The natives are trying to preserve their identity by teaching the younger generations the native language as well as the history.
The Mojave tribe based their society of what they call the creation story. This tale tells the story of Mastamho, the son of the god Matabele, avenging his father's death, resulting in the creation of planet Earth. The creation of the world did not happen easily. Every aspect of life resulted through the unexpected death of the god Matabele, which led to the moral realization to not take anything for granted and that hope will rise even in the darkest of times. This creation story explains how Mastamho created planet Earth after the death of his father. However, another Native American literary piece, known as the Sky Tree, relates to this creation story. The Sky Tree tells the story of Ata Ensik, wife of the old chief of the Skyland. She attempts to save her husband's life by risking the Skyland's most sacred treasure, the Sky Tree. Aiming to save her husband, she destroys this treasure, only to be saved by the turtle, who helped replant this area. Both of these literary pieces tell a story on how a part of Earth was created. The Mojave creation story through the death of Matabele, and the Sky Tree through the destroying of the sacred tree. However, both of these works have another connection. Both of these stories teach a moral lesson, that even in the darkest of times, good can still rise. For instance, the Mojave creation story teaches the audience that the bond between friends, such as Matabele and Mastamho, can lead to something bigger, in this case, the creation of the world. In the Sky Tree, risking all one has for someone they love will repay itself in the end. This work of the creation story is an oral anecdote, passed down through many generations of the Mojave tribe. However, this tale depends on its use of emotional appeal and hyperboles. The emotional appeal creates an understanding for the reasons for the creation story of the Earth. For instance, after Coyote steals the heart of Matabele's dead body, The story states, quote, Mastamho then created a strong wind. After this came rain for 4 days, unquote. This creates a sense of sympathy felt toward Mastamho due to his loss of Matabele. Hyperboles, on the other hand, create a more drastic outcome. In this case, after Mastamho has dealt with the death of Matabele, he decides to carry out his wishes and finish the full creation of the earth. The story says, quote, he made the earth larger by walking successfully in 4 directions. Wherever he stepped, the earth extended, unquote. This example, along with many others in the text, creates a sense of wonder in the creation of the world. This Mojave tale creates that belief. Literary pieces reflect the unique aspects of a specific tribe. Quote, Native American cultures use stories to teach moral lessons and convey practical information about the natural world, unquote. Bruchac. This literature is the basis on which the Mojave tribe was created. The sense of redemption is focused throughout the text, which reflects how the Mojave Indians admire their religious values and focus on honesty and integrity within their community.
The two passages, Shawnee Chief Tecumseh and Chief Seattle's reply, both use rhetorical strategies to try to persuade the American settlers from wanting to move on to their land. In Shawnee Chief Tecumseh's address to General William Henry Harrison, Tecumseh uses emotional appeal to generate sympathy. This is shown when he states, quote, Brother, you have the liberty to return to your own country, end quote. This sense of emotional appeal demonstrates how the Indians have nowhere else to go and how their home is a part of them. The Native American Indians hope the white will understand that they will be taking away their homes while feeling sympathy for them, resulting in them not wanting to move on to their lands. Chief Seattle also uses emotional appeal. This device is utilized when he states, quote, every part of this earth is sacred to my people, unquote. He uses emotional appeal to express sincerely how important the land is to his people. By using emotional appeal, the audience, filled with sincerity and sympathy, might not want to move on to the Native Americans' land. Although both Chief Tecumseh and Chief Seattle uses emotional appeal to persuade their audiences, they also use different rhetorical strategies to get their message across. In Chief Tecumseh's passage, he uses contrast to try to persuade the Americans from settling on their land. This is shown when he states, quote, you never see an Indian endeavor to make the white people do this, unquote. In using contrast, his audience, the white settlers, will be able to see that maybe what they are doing is wrong, furthermore persuading them not to settle onto the lands. On the other hand, Chief Seattle uses causal relationship to get his message across. Causal relationship is shown when he states, contaminate your bed and you will one day suffocate in your own waste. This parallels with the little kid, for instance, begging to play with their Legos. Their parent tells them you can do it, but you have to clean up your mess afterwards. The kid, having to clean up their mess, completely persuaded not to want to play with their Legos. This goes with the white settlers. Chief Seattle tries to keep them from wanting to settle on their sacred land by explaining to them that whatever damage or ruin they bring, they will have to fix it themselves.
The two passages written by Chief Tecumseh and the other by Chief Seattle are in some way similar but remarkably different in the usage of rhetorical strategies. Chief Seattle's passage uses mainly emotional appeal in an attempt to gain sympathy from the Americans. The main way Chief Seattle expresses emotional appeal is through metaphors. For example, when he says, water's murmur is the voice of my father's father. This illustrates to the Americans if the native's land was taken away, all the beauty, all the connections with the ancestors would be lost, and he would never hear his father's voice murmur through the water. All would be lost. While Chief Tecumseh uses casual relationship, attempting to strike fear into the Americans. After a long paragraph, the chief concludes on how everything will get worse. For example, if you continue to purchase them, it will make war among the different tribes, and at last I do not know what will be the consequences among the white people. This illustrates the threat made to the Americans about wars and consequences, something that the new nation, America, would not want to do. Both passages have rhetorical questioning to make the Americans think twice before taking away the natives' lands. Chief Tecumseh questions, quote, sell a country, end quote, trying to make Americans think that it is ridiculous and appalling to ever think someone would or should buy someone else's land. Chief Seattle questions, quote, where is the thicket, where is the eagle, end quote, implying that everything that was good is now gone because of the Americans.
Chief Seattle's reply and Shawnee Chief Tecumseh's address to General William Henry Harrison are both passages that address their helpless views toward the white man's claim of their native land. These texts both portray similar logical messages. However, they approach this message in a different way. For instance, Chief Tecumseh states, quote, "Brother, you have the liberty to return to your own country," end quote. This acknowledgement of General William Henry's authority over the natives pushes to gain sympathy from the whites and attempt to persuade them to realize how vulnerable the natives are, which could possibly lead to the seed from expansion westward. On the other hand, Chief Seattle uses a different tactic to approach this topic. An example of this difference is displayed when he replies, quote, "Contaminate your own bed and you will one night suffocate in your own waste," end quote. This use of casual relationship creates a sense of anxiousness and doubt within the minds of the white settlers, in thought of inflicting their own doom. As a result, Seattle hopes the whites will gain this anxiety and cease their attacks. Although both of these texts contain different ways of approaching the issue of white expansion, they do contain some similarities through emotional appeal. For instance, Chief Tecumseh replies to General William Henry by saying, quote, "Brother, I wish you would take pity on the red people and do as I have required," end quote. Emotional appeal here is based on Tecumseh's begging for mercy, which gives a sense of power to the whites. As a result, this may cause the whites to rethink their ambition to conquer the land and possibly stop the expansion. Nevertheless, Chief Seattle uses a similar tactic when he says, quote, "If we sell you our land, you must remember that the air is precious to us," end quote. Just like Tecumseh's use of emotional appeal, this quote calls for a sense of mercy from the whites. However, this quote displays how Seattle gives more power to the whites in accepting their defeat and losing their land. This quote attempts to provoke a massive amount of sympathy from the whites, in hopes they rethink their morals and cease any further damage against the natives.